China. Its contributions to humanity are immeasurable, and the achievements are ever growing. Although China is at its largest ever, the current communist government is the first to unite its entire country in modern history. And although imperialists attempt to break this unity, the people of every ethnicity, region, and background overwhelmingly remain committed to supporting its system and party. These are the symbols that represent such unity and history. The Chinese flag encompasses these themes through its colors and stars. The red represents the Chinese Communist Revolution, led by the founder of the People's Republic, Mao Zedong. The 5 stars and their relationship signify the great unity of the Chinese people under the leadership of the CPC. The smaller stars represent the 4 social classes from Mao's New Democracy mentioned in his work on the People's Democratic Dictatorship, which states, "The People's Democratic Dictatorship is based on the alliance of the working class, the peasantry, and the urban petty bourgeoisie, but mainly on the alliance of the workers and peasants. These 2 classes are the main forces in overthrowing imperialism and the Kuomintang reactionaries. The national bourgeoisie, at the present stage, is of great importance. Imperialism, a most ferocious enemy, is still standing alongside us. To counter imperialist oppression and to raise her backwards economy to a higher level, China must utilize all the factors of urban and rural capitalism that are beneficial and not harmful to the national economy, and we must unite with the national bourgeoisie in common struggle." These stars all point to the center to symbolize the unity of these classes through the largest star, which represents the Communist Party of China and their leadership to preserve such unity. The national emblem of the People's Republic of China has the red circle to represent the Tiananmen Gate, the entrance gate to the Forbidden City, where Mao declared the foundations of the People's Republic of China. The outer border of the red circle shows sheaves of wheat and the inner sheaves of rice, which together represents the agricultural workers. At the center of the bottom portion of the border is a cogwheel that represents the industrial workers. And the 5 stars are the same that are represented on the flag. The Socialist government of China enshrines these symbols within their very system while upholding thousands of years of meritocracy and intertwining the communistic philosophy of democratic centralism. Comrades, welcome to China's government.
You know, here in the West, we seem to have an impenetrable mental block that fails to grasp the following fact. There are more governmental systems out there beyond the Western democratic and parliamentary styles that work extremely well. Other videos that attempt to explain the Chinese government either fall short in explaining the overall system or are incredibly biased.
According to the Chinese constitution, it is supposed to be the most powerful organ of the state. But the BBC, 英国广播公司, describes it as little more than a rubber stamp for party decisions.
More than $107 billion. But as Mao Zedong once said, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun.
Theoretically, the 3 main institutions of power in China are the party, the military, and the state. But in practice, the party controls all institutions, so it is the leader of the Communist Party, i.e., the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China. who holds ultimate power and authority.
How does China's government actually work? The punishments for threatening the party's dominance are so severe that China is ranked among the lowest nations for press freedoms and human rights.
But here at the Comrade Report, we want to shed any biases and shortcomings to simplify these explanations for everyone to understand, while comprehending and possibly embracing communistic systems that aim to help the people towards prosperity. And I have to say this as a preface, although I do have a political science degree, I am in no way an expert in Chinese government, and if anybody can, good faith, correct me for anything that I have mistakenly said here, I can try to correct it, possibly in a second video. Believe it or not, yours truly had an incredible difficult time grasping several governmental attributes of the Chinese system because, for one, it was hard for me to overcome even my own Western biases, and two, there are an overwhelming amount of resources that fuse the Communist Party of China with the actual government, which is entirely false.
Many foreigners assume that the party and the government are identical. This is false.
In order to understand how the Communist Party of China organizes itself through selecting members, candidates, and leaders for China, we have to have an understanding of the government itself first, and how these entities work with each other. From my understanding from our reading and research, China's government and the CPC work like a Venn diagram, with shared powers, duties, responsibilities, and ideologies. The party created the governmental systems and mechanisms through the People's Republic of China's constitution to carry out its ideology while supporting the needs of the people without capitalist exploitation. But in order to understand how the Communist Party organizes itself to be the largest political party on earth, we need to understand the government and how it led the Chinese people into the prosperity they enjoy today. Once we do that, comrades, I'm going to make a separate video on how the CPC structures itself and all the party rules and whatnot for you to finally understand. Now, there are a bunch of topics we can talk about with China's government, but the main subjects we will focus on will be the central government. I read this book about China's political system from the same makers who made the Marxism and Socialism with Chinese Characteristics textbook. This book was published back in 2011, and I had to supplement some materials to keep things up to date. But the book outlines the following constructs as major areas of China's national government here. But for the sake of brevity and efficiency, however, we're just going to focus on these topics here. Because I'm an attorney, I want to make a completely separate video dedicated to the Chinese legal system. Additionally, I will cover the PLA, or the People's Liberation Army, in a separate video as well. But overall, from what we've researched here, these branches of government are key to understanding how China functions under their constitution, with the National People's Congress, or the NPC, being the head of the entire governmental system of China. The basic framework of the government is provided by the Constitution, which instills the socialist system prominently. From its preamble that proudly states that the guiding ideology of the entire country is Marxism-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought, right down to the articles for structuring its government, China's commitment to socialism is ingrained in its governmental systems. For instance, these 6 articles outline the socialistic foundations for China's overall governmental structures. Article 1. The People's Republic of China is a socialist state under the People's Democratic Dictatorship, led by the working class and based on the alliance of workers and peasants. Article 2. All power in the People's Republic of China belongs to the people. The National People's Congress and the local People's Congresses at various levels are the organs through which the people exercise state power. Article 3. The state organs of the People's Republic of China applied the principle of democratic centralism. For those who don't know what democratic centralism is, it's an organizational method applied by the Bolsheviks before and during the Russian Revolution. Democracy in discussion, centralism in action, as the quote goes. Basically, party members can discuss and disagree when debating about proposals and ideas, but once that's all done and a consensus has been made, all party members must uphold the decision. Again, this is a very simplified definition, but we'll see how the CPC infuses this method with meritocracy and promotion within the government. Article 6. The basis of the socialist economic system of the People's Republic of China is socialist public ownership of the means of production, namely, ownership by the whole people, and collective ownership by the working people. Article 14. The state continuously raises labor productivity, improves economic results, and develops the productive forces by enhancing the enthusiasm of the working people. Article 15. The state practices socialist market economy. With that said, comrades, let's dive into this dense system of magnificent beauty that has led a country of 1.4 billion into unbelievable prosperity. Here in the United States, we have a notion of shared powers between states and the federal government. China's levels are more unified, where the Constitution encapsulates many levels of the country under the central government. In accordance with this constitution, the country is divided into provinces, autonomous regions, and municipalities, directly under the central government. These levels are equivalent to a state where governors sit in the US. There are also special administration regions of Hong Kong and Macau, which has its own local governmental systems, but are still under the central government and govern through their basic laws or constitutional agreements enacted after their handover from imperialist colonizer, the UK and Portugal. These provinces and autonomous regions are further divided between 3 subdivisions that are equivalent to cities, counties and districts, and townships. Although all these levels are linked under the central government, some areas have different degrees of autonomy and governance. There is one level that I do want to touch on that is highly relevant due to recent current events. Contrary to so many Western narratives, China takes a tremendous amount of pride and diligence to ensure the preservation of ethnic minorities, their society, and their culture. The country has 56 ethnic groups, and the Han make up just over 90% of the population. The ethnic population makes up over 120 million, which is over 40% of the entire population of the United States. The Constitution states that all ethnic groups in China are equal. The state protects the lawful rights and interests of all minorities and takes all forms of discrimination and oppression against them illegal. There are 155 ethnic autonomous areas, 5 of which are provinces, including Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, and Tibet. However, those minority groups that have a small population or are in scattered communities, the Constitution provides that townships can be provided for these populations to, quote, exercise their right to be masters of their own destiny and manage their internal affairs. Currently, there are more than 1,100 of these townships in China today. The system of ethnic autonomy lies in self-governance for their own internal affairs, as they have many responsibilities and duties that are independent from most provinces in China. The leaders of these regions, all the way down to the townships, must prioritize ethnic minorities that are qualified to take governmental posts. However, the heads of autonomous regions must always be citizens of the ethnic minority. As discussed in my other videos, the citizens enjoy preferential advantages to social opportunities like employment, education, and lesser criminal sentences. In fact, the Constitution states the following: the People's Republic of China is a unified multi-ethnic state founded by the Chinese people of all ethnic groups. Social ethnic relations of equality, unity, and mutual assistance and harmony are established and will continue to be strengthened. In the struggle to safeguard the ethnic unity, we should oppose major ethnic group chauvinism, which mainly refers to Han chauvinism and local ethnic chauvinism. The state makes every effort to promote the shared prosperity of the country's ethnic groups. With these established, let's move on to more political bodies within China, particularly the National People's Congress, or the NPC. The NPC is the most important governmental body in China. Under the Constitution, all power in China belongs to the people. The venue where the people exercises state power on a national level is a National People's Congress. Unlike the United States or the UK, China uses a unicameral system to enact its laws, and the number of members in the NPC, who are also called deputies, are proportional to an area's population. The lower congresses are instituted through democratic direct elections of deputies where all Chinese citizens over the age of 18 can vote. Candidates for deputies to these lower congresses are nominated by political parties and organizations and are elected to 5-year terms. For the National People's Congress, Article 59 of the Constitution explains, the National People's Congress is composed of deputies elected from provinces, autonomous regions, municipalities directly under the central government, and special administrative regions, and the deputies elected from the armed forces. All the minority nationalities are entitled to appropriate representation. Deputies are selected from provinces, autonomous regions, and municipality levels within those people's congresses.
County level, the general public can directly elect deputies, but at the level above the county, the deputies are elected by representatives from a lower level. The composition of the deputies has been diversified over the past decade. Of the People's Congress come from every corner of the society. We have deputies from the female, deputies from the rural migrant workers.
Now, how much different is that from, say, the Congress of the United States? They're political elites. They come from business. They come from law. They're supported by lobbying interests.
If you want to learn more on how deputies are elected, I highly suggest watching this video from a Chinese citizen, which has English subtitles explaining this process. The National People's Congress itself is the highest political organ and legislative body in China. In 2018, the NPC had 2,980 deputies, making it the largest legislative body in the world, 25% of whom were women, which is higher than the United States. Just as a side note, among communist countries, China is only 4th out of the 5 communist countries in the world, with Cuba being the highest. And Cuba is the second highest in the entire world, with having 53% of its parliament filled with women. The NPC meets about for 2 weeks every year, and Article 62 lists 16 duties of the body, which includes overseeing the enforcement of the Constitution, enacting and amending basic laws, electing and appointing heads of state, including the president, vice president, and the premier for the state council, and judicial interpretations of the Constitution, which is usually up to the Supreme Court here in the United States.
As the highest organ of state power, the NPC collectively possesses executive, legislative, and judicial powers. Its power includes amending the Constitution, enacting and amending basic laws, electing the President and Vice President of China, voting to decide the Premier of the State Council, and electing the Procurator General and President of the People's Supreme Court.
There's this notion that the NPC is sort of like a rubber stamp legislature that just approves all the legislation and budgets that the standing committee or the party sends their way. But that has changed dramatically since the 1990s, and the body has been exceedingly independent in holding the government more accountable and responsible for what it's doing.
And then in turn, there's committees that work throughout the year to develop the legislation that turns that into laws and regulations that can be implemented, and more about reflecting needs from bottom up, top down, and getting the job done. That's how the system works. It's all about embracing change and being responsive rather than just reactive to your political opponent. I think the Western media keeps saying rubber stamp, but they're not in touch with the changes that are happening here.
In reviewing draft laws, the NPC must seek comments from localities, various departments, scholars, and experts, as well as the general public, through seminars or other public channels. Draft laws directly concerning the public are published in the press to draw more comments. Bills and proposals may be submitted by the Presidium or the Executive Committee. When a bill or proposal has been put on the agenda of the session, the submitting party will make a plea or an explanation on it at the plenary meeting. The proposal will then be examined by the plenary meeting deputies, group meetings, or special committees. Finally, it will be adopted provided that more than half of the deputies voted in favor of it. Now, the NPC handles the major pieces of legislation and issues facing China, along with the election of heads of state. But during these 2 weeks, there are actually 2 simultaneous sessions that are happening: the Congress itself and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or the CPPCC. The CPPCC acts as an advisory conference where multiple interest parties, agendas, and organizations come together and discuss legislation. As you can see, there are multiple parties and organizations that make up the CPPCC, and explains their influence more here.
Its political consultation covers major principles and policies proposed by the central and local governments. It also extends to matters of importance concerning political, economic, cultural, and social affairs. The CPPCC conducts consultations before policy decisions are made, while the NPC votes on policy decisions after the consultations are completed.
The CPPCC advises and consults before policy decisions are made, while the Congress itself votes on these decisions after these consultations. So the NPC meets for about 2 weeks and disbands for the rest of the year, and then there's nothing, right? Wrong! The Standing Committee is the permanent organ of the NPC, which comprises of a chairman, vice chairman, general secretary, and 175 members of the NPC. The NPC itself elects these 175 members, and when they are not in session, the Standing Committee basically takes the reins from there and continues the work of the NPC throughout the year. This is a very brief overview of the overall structure and organization of the largest legislative body in the world. We'll now go into China's presidency and its executive bodies. Now, in the West, presidents or prime ministers usually are the leaders that execute such legislation that passes through their parliaments. But in China, the presidency and executive powers are completely separate. The president is elected by the NPC for a term of 5 years. There used to be term limits in place where a president would only serve for 2 terms, but they were abolished back in 2018. And President Xi Jinping is currently serving on his 2nd term and will most likely serve a 3rd term in 2023. The presidency actually holds very limited power, but are still relevant and mimic that of the United States. The president of China has 6 powers: signing and promulgating statutes, issuing orders, appointing, nominating, and removing personnel, conferring medals and honors, managing diplomatic relations, and declaring war. However, the vast majority of presidential powers are dependent on the ratification of the NPC. The president is, in essence, a symbolic post without any direct say in the governance of the state. But remember, Xi Jinping is both serving as president of China and general secretary of the CPC, where his own ideology is enshrined as Xi Jinping thought for socialism with Chinese characteristics in a new era, which has shaped China's recent prosperity and actions in the 21st century. However, if the executory powers do not lie in the president, where do they lie? With the State Council and the Premier. The State Council is the administrative or executory branch of the Chinese government. According to the Constitution, the Council implements the statutes and resolutions adopted by the NPC through its departments and ministries, as well as organizes and manages the administration of political, economic, cultural, and defensive affairs. The Council oversees 26 ministry-level executive departments and are led by cabinet members selected by the Premier. The Premier is the head of the Council and is responsible for overseeing its functions. The Premier is nominated by the President and approved by the NPC, and the position is currently held by Li Keqiang. As we can see, comrades, we are just scratching the surface of China's governmental system. But this system has proven to be just as effective or even more effective than the multi-party democratic systems of the West, where people's voices are actually heard here rather than the wealthy elite.
Party theorists stress that concentrating on big things can avoid the long decision-making cycles, tedious procrastination, laxity, and inefficiency in capitalist society. This advantage, they say, is founded not only on the strong leadership of the CPC, but also on public ownership of the means of production. Because only when the lifeline of the national economy is in the hands of the state, they say, can it concentrate large amounts of manpower and material and mobilize all forces to accomplish big things.
The purpose of this video, comrades, is for us to obtain a deeper understanding of systems like these, and show that we cannot just shallowly say that China is an authoritarian government that doesn't work non-stop for the people like this. The NPC is the heart of the system, which all branches are beholden as they are closest to the people.
We can see that it's a kind of a triangle. We have the government, the people, and the People's Congress. So the government is delivering services to the citizens, and the citizens can comply or to submit their concerns to the People's Congress. The People's Congress can prepare proposals to request the government to address citizens' concerns. So I think it's a kind of virtuous circle, which means that the three players can interplay with each other and then to produce what we call a good governance.
The CPC ensures good governance and harmony among the population while leading China towards socialism and communism. Let me just end with this statement from the Constitution. After the founding of the People's Republic of China, our country gradually achieved the transition of a new democratic society to a socialist society. The socialist transformation of private ownership of the means of production has been completed, the system of exploitation of man by man abolished, and the socialist system established. The People's Democratic Dictatorship, led by the working class and based on an alliance of workers and peasants, which in essence is a dictatorship of the proletariat, has been consolidated and developed. The Chinese people and the Chinese People's Liberation Army has defeated imperialism and hegemonist aggression, sabotaged and armed provocations, safeguarded national independence and security, and strengthened national defense. Major achievements have been made in economic development, as independent and relatively complete socialist industrial systems have now basically been established, and agricultural output has markedly increased. Significant advances have been made in education, science, culture, and other fields, and education about socialist thought has made notable progress. The lives of the people have been considerably improved, and they continue to improve, as the world must learn from its example to put the people first and on a socialist pathway towards prosperity. Thank you, comrades, for joining me in solidarity.